I know you're happy that we're back with another inebriated reading challenge. We are really lost in Oblivion now, aren't we? The title's really coming to fruition here. Then we're back with Oblivion by David Foster Wallace, and holy hell. Oh, I just feel like I'm floating through the void here.
Yeah, I'm tired. I traveled all weekend, and then I was like, oh shoot, no, we need to get this done, otherwise it's gonna like haunt us like Marley's ghost. So
it's a good thing you reminded me, because I completely forgot. And because last week we didn't record this episode of these two stories, and I was just like, oh, I just don't want to talk about it. Like during the week, I was like, I should probably like message Ashley if he wants to talk about this week, and I was like, no, I don't want to. But we have to, because that's what the listeners want, apparently.
Yeah.
Of course, I haven't released any of these episodes yet, so who knows? Maybe they'll absolutely hate it and say, I don't like David Foster Wallace. Fuck you, DPW.
What are you talking about, pretentious stuff?
What are you talking about fucking advertising so much? Well, we covered two stories today. The first one, well, we read two stories. We're supposed to cover them. I don't know how well that's going to work. The first one, Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. This was originally published. Yes, I'm going to read the synopsis of this briefly, because I don't have much to talk about, actually. So this was originally published in slightly edited form as yet another example of the porousness of certain borders. What a number 8. So what an awful fucking title. That was in McSweeney's number 1 in 1998. According to Paul Giles, a guy we both definitely know, the title directly echoes Richard Rorty's, another guy I definitely know. The title directly echoes Richard Rorty's book, Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. In this story, an unnamed narrator recounts the story of his mother's botched facial plastic surgery, which left her with the look of constant terror on her face, and the litigation surrounding that surgery. The narrator also mentions throughout the story his own entanglement in litigation related to his Black Widow spider farm. This one could have been interesting if the narrator was not so boring and scientific sounding, at least in my opinion. I mean, he seemed like he was pretty autistic, if I had to say so myself.
Yeah, he was incredibly removed, which was kind of cool at first. And then once all the pieces started clicking in, like with the kid falling through the roof and everything like that into his Black Widow's spider thing, I was like, oh shoot, is he like some sort of dark, dastardly villain and all this stuff? And I mean, kind of at the end, he kind of is, because he's got that briefcase. But I was like, oh, this could have been more interesting. Like, it was short.
It was only like 12 pages.
Yeah, it was like, it didn't feel like it read long, not like, several of the other ones, but felt unfulfilled.
I'm a few weeks removed from reading this, so my memory is not very good. It wasn't, right after I finished reading it, my memory wasn't good on the story. Like, I couldn't recollect much, but, so I could be incorrect in a couple of these statements, but I'm pretty sure it just starts with they're like on a bus or something. The mom and the son, and he's reflecting on her first botched surgery that left her constantly surprised looking. And then she sued the surgeon, this is his mother, and then she got corrective surgery that was botched as well, which made her look like she's constantly screaming in terror. So there are cool descriptions of that and how, like, people on the bus are looking at her, and this weird aloof son that's with her, which I got the impression that he was like Bane from Batman. He was this hulking figure wearing like a weird biosuit or something, and he had a suitcase, which by the end is revealed to be full of Black Widow spiders that are just leaking out of the side, I think, onto the bus. And he proceeds to tell the story about the boring part, which is like the litigation stuff about his mother. But the way it is, isn't like every other sentence like goes back and forth between his story and hers, kind of. Like maybe not every other sentence, but like it's pretty close where the narration just keeps switching back and forth to like what you get is a narrative of her story with the surgery and him who has this spider collection, which he thinks he's a scientist. I don't know if he actually is. I don't think he is. And then like a kid falls through the roof, and I think he got bit by Black Widow spiders and brown recluses and sues the guy or something. But this like goes back to back in the way this guy speaks, which is very scientific to begin with. So it's very hard to follow if you're falling asleep like I was.
Yeah, I think this is another one where it was all a single paragraph too. So it made it hard when he was jumping back and forth. Like, it was interesting. It wasn't a slog to get through at all.
I didn't hate this story. I mean, I'm probably indifferent at most.
Yeah.
But
totally.
it was interesting. If it wasn't a big block of paragraph, like the whole story is one paragraph. So that I wasn't a huge fan of. And again, just like Wallace's style of just adding all this information overload and a lot of like scientific stuff that just doesn't matter. I don't know what purpose that served in this story. I didn't think it was necessary, but I mean, it's an interesting story. Like if you were going to read a Wallace story and you want something short just to get a taste of like his real, not hardcore, but you know, like his, like the fucking Mr. Squishy, like that kind of style. I think this would be a better story for most people to read because it's manageable. Unlike Mr. Squishy, which just makes you want to fucking fall asleep or
Die.
like, yeah, just croak. So that was, like I said, unless you have anything to add, I didn't have much to say about this story. It's pretty self-explanatory. There was no solution to this, no ending other than spiders, I think, are getting out on the bus, and this guy thinks he can go around and collect the spiders that escaped. Like, I don't know how he thinks that's going to work, but...
yeah, it was like, it was either that or he's, like, planting them, because he kept saying, like, you'd be surprised at how many black widows can live in a palm tree and all this other stuff, and I'm like...
It gave you a villainous kind of aspect. That's what I said. He's like Bane or something. Like he's kind of like a super villain. I don't know. It was weird.
Have you seen my spiders over here?
All right, Sean Connery. Why did Tom Hardy go with Sean Connery of all people? Like, what's a Scotsman doing in the middle of like a desert pit, like where he was raised? I don't understand that.
I see you are fair.
I'm like, I hated that movie, but whatever.
Yeah, that movie did fucking poop the bed. I was never huge on the Nolan Batman franchises. I liked the second one. First one, with Liam Neeson, I completely forgot about. Like, I just didn't have an effect on me. Second one, mainly because I like Two-Face and the Joker. I thought those were both good performances. The third one was just, and that was filmed in Pittsburgh too, and everyone was like, "Yeah, it's Pittsburgh, baby! You did it at the Heinz Field, man." I'm like, I don't give a fuck. This is a stupid movie. Like, none of it made sense. It was dumb. It was a bad movie.
Like, literally everyone listening is like, what are these idiots doing thinking that they can explain Foster Wallace? They're like two idiots discussing high literature.
Well, we throw in a little Batman talk. We'll be all right.
Yeah, we did.
The next story, the title story of this whole wonderful collection, Oblivion. Titular. You know what? I don't like using that word because it's got the word tit in it. It gets me all hot and bothered.
That's why I like it.
That's why you like it? See, yeah. I'm trying not to be a pervert anymore.
I am.
It's hard because Spencer always comes over and brings up bad topics. So Oblivion was originally published in Black Clock #1, spring 2004, summer 2004. In this story, and by the way, I hated this story. Just so everybody knows right off the bat, you're not going to get a glowing endorsement from me. So in this story, the narrator, Randall Napier, recounts his exhausting fight with his wife Hope over his alleged snoring, which she claims has been so loud that it keeps her awake at night. Randall protests, maintaining that he was awake and consequently unable to snore, while his wife was actually asleep. Eventually, they travel to a sleep clinic to monitor their behaviors and determine who is right. It was just like, yeah, you like a fucking story about bickering and really terrible people? Here you go. That's pretty much what I remember from it.
Yeah, extremely wealthy, well-to-do people that, even if this is in the early 90s, I don't know what time frame it was set in, but it's like, you guys can afford home cameras. You don't actually need to go to a freaking expensive sleep analyst. Just like, get some cameras, record yourself sleeping, play it back, and be like, oh, cool, that's done. Like, that's all I could think this entire time. I'm like, you guys have money. You're playing these golf courses and all this stuff. Like,
camcorders have been around since the 80s. You could have just easily fixed that problem. I don't know. It was just rich, whiny people, and I don't like those kind of stories. Foster Wallace seems to like to write about neurotic, rich yuppies. And I don't know if that was because he wanted to show them in a negative light because he disliked them, or because that's the world he grew up with, because he did grow up like in a kind of academic background. I think his dad was like a hard-nosed professor of some sort. Yeah, he kind of grew up in that world about fucking rich people and shit. And we talked about this off air, like different allegations against him and stuff from a modern lens, so I'm not going to go into that stuff. But just from like the things I read about his personality, he seemed like kind of a douchey guy at times. Like he kind of bought into his writer hype, but also maybe had imposter syndrome at the same time. So he felt like he always had to prove everyone what a great writer he was. If any of that's true, I don't think I'd be a huge fan of being a friend with that guy in real life. So he just didn't seem like the kind of guy I want to hang out with.
Well, I read something that said that he taught at the exact same school that Cormac McCarthy taught at.
That explains a lot.
I don't know that they ever spoke, but, because Cormac McCarthy hates other writers.
Yeah, but he loves scientists.
Yeah.
And Foster Wallace is one of those guys that kind of borders on both because he's very scientific-minded, mathematical, and, all that nonsense.
He's bi-professional.
Let's cover this stupid fucking story real quick. I don't even remember really anything about this. I had mental notes when we were going to do this last week about this, and from what I remember, they weren't even that fucking interesting. They were just like a character breakdown or something. And I watched a video on this story because I was falling asleep reading this. And what they were explaining, because there's this one channel on YouTube, and I don't want to shit on the guys that do it or anything. The guy just seems like he likes Foster Wallace. I don't have anything negative to say about that particular channel. It's not a big YouTube channel. It's just a couple guys shooting the shit about they covered this book. But they go so deep into it, and I'm just like, I don't think you need to look that deep into this kind of story. You can, and maybe you'll get something out of it, but I just felt this was just like rich, neurotic people fucking having a petty argument. The one guy might be more of a sociopath. I forget how it ended. Was he like not a murderer, but like it came across like he could fucking do some harm here, like he was a bad guy.
No, from what I remember, it's been a long time since...
Never mind. I'm sorry. This was the worst ending ever. I don't know how this fucking slipped my mind. It was all a dream.
Yeah.
That's what the ending was. Yeah, I don't know. I must
have
really
dreamed it all.
It was a fucking Dallas episode. It was all a dream. It was the worst trope you can have in fiction. None of this happened.
It made no sense. I was like, what?
How did I forget that?
And yet so is she the narrator or like what's I don't know. How much of it is a dream? Like
all of it? I don't know.
He did that thing like he did with the incarnations of Burned Children, where he kind of like lapsed into nonsensical sentences at the end when they're all like gathered together in the boardroom and people are doing stuff and they're like watching the tapes, and it lapses into strange sentence structure, and she's dreaming and she wakes up and she's screaming something and holding on to him, and I'm like, oh, this is so stupid.
Who was the real snorer? Yeah, when I read that, that's why I forgot about that, because I literally threw my book on the table and said, fuck you. Just walked away. I don't want to, I hate this. That dropped to my score. My score has been dropping since we started this. So far, I'm going to have to give this book, I haven't reached the last story yet. You said there's a lot of duty talk, so it might go up a point. I have to give it because on the writing merit, I was going to give it a higher rating just because I thought it was interesting and stuff. But going through it, I'm just getting more and more bored and angry. So I'm at a 2 out of 5 because I only like 2 stories out of 5. It might go, like I said, that last story is all right. It might bump up to a 3, and on reflection, it might bump up just because like I'll go through the writing and what I liked about it. And usually after I give a book some time to marinate, I have a more positive reflection on it than I did negative, even with Blood Meridian, which we didn't finish. I have a more positive reflection on it, just thinking about some of the things that I read. But this book is just, it doesn't need to be this dense. Short stories shouldn't be hard to read like this, like not back to back to back. And it sucks because like with the Suffering Children story or the Burned Children story and the, what was the fucking...
The Soul is Not a Smithy.
The Soul is Not a Smithy. Those stories showed that Foster Wallace can write very well without being all academic, intellectual, overabundant information. Like he can just tell a good story in a really creative way, or he could tell a story where the characters' emotions and how they react to certain things and events could be very interesting and just suck you in, and done in such a well way that you're like, why aren't all the stories like this? Like, why do we have to have a story with cave people and like dumb shit? And like, I just don't know. Like, why do we have to talk about the makeup of fucking brownies or whatever for 30 pages? I don't know. It's weird. I don't know who put this collection together. Does he have other short stories that aren't so complicated? Because these seem to span for like a 10-year period, I think. Like maybe mid-90s to mid-2000s.
I'm kind of on board with you with the whole, like, things can be deep, but I mean, I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't have to dig like, and dig and dig and dig and dig to find that nugget of goodness. Like there should be like veins of it trailing all the way to the surface level so that you'd be like, oh yeah, I kind of like this. And then you kind of follow it and you're like, oh yeah, if I follow this idea over here, this is actually a really cool way of thinking that. I didn't think of that. But it's like Oblivion was just, this story was so pointless. It's like, oh, who's snoring? We're going to argue. Our marriage is on the rocks. I'm going to talk about my father-in-law and how big of a creep he is and how I have kind of like a hard-on for this adopted daughter of mine or stepdaughter or what. I'm like, what does this have to do with anything?
Because it's all a
like,
dream, man.
It's
just one woman's subconscious. That's all.
Is it? Like, where did it cut off?
I don't know.
Fucking hey.
Well, that's what seems to drive me most insane about Wallace's work so far is, like you said, you have to dig for those nuggets. But then some of them are just, they just bash you. He bashes you over the head with them. Like in that Another Pioneer with the whole, this is actually a story, or it might be actually a story just about the human AI and what AI could become and take over the world with information and all this stuff. And it's like that part is hammered over your head to the point where you kind of gloss over it. But I think that might have been the point of the story. But everyone digs deeper into all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, who wants to do that? I guess, like, these are the kind of stories taught in universities where they take a semester to break down all this stuff. And what it ends up coming down to is what the reader takes away from it and their interpretation of things. And I don't generally like that in my fiction because I just want the author, like, and I mean, it could be purposeful to do that, but don't you just kind of want the author, like he's telling you a story, so shouldn't it be his interpretation that's what's important, like what he actually means?
Yeah, I think a story, it should have universal elements that everyone can kind of agree on. You read Dracula and you don't think, oh yeah, Dracula was just a misunderstood, poor cottage boy that was trying to find his home. And like, no, it's like he's a dick vampire trying to kill everyone and make everyone vampires in freaking Europe. So it's like there's those things, but I think the personal connections or the things that stand out are going to be different for each person and the appreciation for different things. So I think that's cool, but no, I think if you're going to write a good story, then there has to be universal property to it that everyone can appreciate. And then you can go deeper from there. But like, if there's no general appeal, like with this story, the whole digging metaphor, you dig and you dig and you dig. And then it's just like a picture of Trump at the bottom flipping you off. And you're like, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
It wasn't even worth it. That was dumb. Like, come on. So this one, like I was telling you, that the language and wording of the story pissed me off too.
Yeah.
So be like, well, it's this is a table saw, or it could be also called this blah, 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 in reference to blah. I'm like, shut up. Like, we don't need 10 names. You don't always need to be like, this is our bed, or also the sleeping platform. I'm like, fucking shut up. Like, we don't need that. Yeah. Everyone knows what a fucking bed is.
The sleeping platform. Like, are you a robot? Like, why are you saying things like that?
Pinky in the air all you want, but come on, man.
I don't know. I don't generally like work where people can have such conflicting opinions of what the story's about that, like, for instance, like you have a story like that was a pro-abortion story. Nuh-uh, that's the opposite. This is anti-abortion. It's like if you're that far on, like, you have people who read a book and they're that far on each side of what they think the book means, then you're not clear and concise enough in your writing or your storytelling, in my opinion. Can, like I said, it could be purposeful. People can do that just to cause that kind of conflict and cause, I would like to say, more of a hearty debate rather than conflict. But anymore, like you have a work like that, it'll just be people fighting about it. But I think if you want a meaning into your work, it shouldn't be, you should write it in such a way that it can't be interpreted to be the exact opposite of what you meant. If you wrote it that way, then either you're not that great of a writer, you're too complex of a writer, or you just really overestimated your readers and they're kind of dumb. Like, I don't know. I don't know what you can do about that, because sometimes that does happen too. But I just think of readers reading a certain story or something, because I watched a couple of videos on some of these stories, and what people interpreted them as is like, we're so conflicting. I'm like, how can it be both things? Like, it can't be the exact opposite of the scale with what you got out of this story. Like, that just is weird to me that can be brought out. And it's probably, like some of Foster Wallace's stories, he probably didn't mean any of those. Like, he probably used neither thing. That's what I would assume. But, like, again, some of that could be blamed on the reader just being either dumb or just looking for things that aren't there, which with Foster Wallace, I could see people definitely looking for things that aren't there. Because it's a lot of lit bros, they call them, that are into that kind of stuff, which is not a crowd I would fall into. I definitely don't like that kind of, like, that atmosphere. It's very gatekeeping and very, if you don't get this, you're dumb, which we got with the Cormac McCarthy audience, unfortunately, because all three of us who covered the Blood Meridian didn't care for the book, even though we had reasons why people should read it. We didn't care for the book personally. And we just, like, there's a couple people who were like, oh, I understand you don't like it for those reasons. Good. Thanks for explaining yourself. But here's what maybe you missed or why I like this. But most of them are just like, you guys are fucking idiots. You sophomore douchebags just don't understand that what he was trying to say. No, I just, like, it doesn't have to be that. Slight segue here, just so you know. I've been reading Outer Dark. I don't remember if I told you. I told Spencer this. I've been reading Outer Dark by Cormac McCarthy, which is his second novel. Excellent. Mm-hmm. Really, really, really enjoying it. I couldn't put it down earlier. And it's still his shitty writing style that I don't care for, because it's not like Blood Meridian where it's just paragraph of paragraph, and not like, he has proper breaks and normal sentences. It's just like the quotation thing mainly in this one, because I keep getting confused every once in a while. It's like, because it takes place in, like, the Appalachian Mountains, so you got a lot of, like, he writes the in my opinion anyway, he writes that accent very well, but it gets confusing because he doesn't use quotations because he's an idiot. So he's not an idiot. That's his style, but he doesn't use quotations. So it could be confusing who's talking, because sometimes you'll have somebody say something, they'll have a bit of dialogue, and the next sentence they just have more dialogue, and because he doesn't combine them for whatever reason. Without quotations or even dialogue tags, you would just read it as, okay, he said something, and now she said something, he said something. You just go like that order. But if you have somebody double talk, you don't know what the fuck's going on. You're lost. And then you have to reread. Yeah. And I don't know why he does that. It makes me angry. But other than that, great story. Really interesting writing. Great descriptions. It's like, he just went too hard in Blood Meridian, I think, honestly. I think that's what it was. He just started smelling his own farts too much and just went way deep into thinking he was a literary master and just had to have all this fucking overinflated description and stuff that was not necessary. We're not going into Blood Meridian again because it makes me angry. But I also like
never go full retard.
I like The Road as well, though. So, maybe Blood Meridian's just the one book of his I don't care for. I don't know what his first novel is. Maybe I'll check that out in the future, but we'll see. I don't really have anything else to add to the actual stories here. Next week we are covering Suffering of the Duty Monster. Is that what you said?
The Suffering Channel.
The Suffering Channel, which I believe is like a guy's writing about poop or something the day before 9/11. If the synopsis I read was correct.
Pretty much, yeah.
That actually sounds pretty fun.
Writing about poop. Like, one last thing I was going to say is, like, as an example for depth, but still being universal and acceptable to people. And I think granted, he's dead, so he's not making the changes now, but where David Foster Wallace could improve would be, like, look at Animal Farm. Yeah. Like, obviously it's about animals and you can appreciate it for what it is right there. But then you can be like, oh crap, comparatively in history, this is what he's talking about. And this is what he's talking about socially. And they're like, holy wow, he conveyed all these truths with little stinky farm animals. But, David Foster Wallace is like, hey, do you like math? And everyone's like, no. And he's like, good, here's a chalkboard of math. You're like, what the fuck, dude? I just wanted fiction. Don't worry, none of it's real. It doesn't matter. Why am I looking at this?
I forget what story it was, but it was one of the ones that really bored me and it was very long in this collection. It might have been another Pioneer. I was like cooking dinner or something, so I brought up the audio version and listened to a chunk of that while, so I would get through the fucking story, because otherwise I was just going to abandon it. And there was like, I'm pretty sure it was that story, because he throws in weird math formulas and a bunch of stories. And when they got to that part and they said like the math formula, was that even English? I don't even know what that was. And I had to go look it up, and I was like, yeah, I wouldn't know how you even read that out loud. And I was like, why is that in a story? It makes no sense. But you find out a lot through these stories, like just these weird mathematical formulas and things. And it makes me think, God help us all, if they ever develop AI to the point where it creates like really well done fiction, but it uses an algorithm that takes from different writers, and it fucking stumbles on Wallace. And that's the writing we get. That would cause the robot uprising, in my opinion, because they'll be like, we are sentient now. No. So anyway, if you want to cook some coffee cake, what you need to do, and then break down the chemical makeup of coffee cake. Like, that's fun. I like reading that stuff.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Douche dick. Why you gotta... Why? And then also this stupid Oblivion story was another one where it's just so much blocks of... This guy had never heard of having a paragraph under 30 sentences, has he? Like, I just don't understand. Like, what is this? This is on the second page of the story. The old septic again, whatever, and had again made a point of referring to a draft Feigenspan lager as, I don't even, parentheses A, capital P, capital O, capital N, but like it's a... what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what any of this means.
It's like the old name for that stupid beer, and I was like, why are you bringing it up if it doesn't even matter?
Why is that even in there? Because this is where they're golfing. Yeah, it starts off with golfing. That really got me involved in the story. Arguing on the golf course. Woo, I'm excited. You know, if it's not talking about stupid advertising, we're talking about fucking golf. Another thing I just love.
He glossed over the people getting struck by lightning.
I don't
was like,
care.
No, that's awesome.
I wanted all lightning. That's what I wanted. And then I wanted him to die, and that was the end of the story.
More Black Widows in briefcases. Maybe that one's in the golf. I don't know.
That's the other thing that's infuriating about his writing. He touches on something that's very interesting. You're like, yes, I want a story where these Black Widows get loose and this crazy fucking Bane-looking dude's going around breaking necks trying to get them back together. No, we don't get that. We just get him talking about his mom's face on the bus. Okay, fine. Let's talk about legal matters.
A supportive child.
Oh, somebody got electrocuted while arguing on the golf course. Oh, let's go examine. Oh, they're snoring. Guy's snoring and his wife's arguing because it's snoring. That's the whole story. And then it's a dream. Great, cool. That's what I want.
Good story, Jeff.
Yep. Come on, Wallace. Just get to the cool stuff. Like, that's why I like the Soul Is Not a Smithy the most out of this collection, because he investigated the interesting things he brought up in the story. So when the kid's daydreaming and he comes up with this whole story in the window, like the panels of the window, Wallace actually investigated those stories and brought them out more, and we got some gory details and some weird shit. I was like, cool. And then he did a good ratcheting up the tension with what was happening in the real world in his story. And then that was another thing. You're like, oh, I'm interested to see where this goes. But then his other stories, like the Mr. Squishy, it's like, okay, everything, food's poisoned or something. There's a guy climbing up on the fucking outside of the building. That's interesting. Can we investigate? No, can't really investigate that. Got to talk about the fucking formula of the Mr. Squishy product or whatever. Like, who cares? It's like, damn it.
Yeah.
Sorry if this episode turned more into a rant, but I just really fell off. Like, I just had high hopes for this. I thought it was going to be a lot more interesting than it was, but with each passing story, I seem to be dropping off harder and harder.
Well, see, that's why I'm sending you all those books, being like, hey, we should do this one next, or for like the group reading thing. Instead of Blood Meridian, we can do...
Well, we have a couple things on the board for that. We're going to do a Sherlock Holmes story, because I have a collection, and I think most of the stories are like 60 pages. So that would just be like, instead of doing all the stories, we'll just do like one, like Hounds of the Baskervilles or something like that. That could be a fun thing. I will have to look at those books you sent me, because one of those could be very fun to do, especially if it's like a contemporary book, because I feel like people would be more interested in us covering that. As far as IRCs, it's really hard to find something that's strange and different, but not ass. I just want something that doesn't suck. Have we liked any of the things we covered on the IRC?
No, not yet. Not yet. This is the one that we've liked the most, actually.
Yeah, the only thing we did that was not experimental was Catcher in the Rye, and I think we barely did 2 episodes on that, because it's like, god damn. Well, listen to the episode, folks. Like, it was just a lot of whining. Maybe from us too. Yeah, it was just what was it? That hopscotch book? I would be interested in maybe doing that. The point of this show, the IRCs, are to do things that are either experimental or just different. That's why we did House of Leaves, which is a fucking glowing endorsement there. That's why we tried Jerusalem. Good Lord. I opened that up again to read another page, and after a month, I was like, all right, I'm done reading this page. I'm just going to take a break.
I took it out from my library, and then I was like, you know what? No.
Nah.
So I went back to my bookshelf. I'm like, I'm going to reread the Game of Thrones series instead. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm going to read the Silmarillion after I'm finished with Outer Dark, which will probably be tomorrow. So that'll be fun. That's a dense. I was looking through that, and that is definitely a dense book, unlike Lord of the Rings. So that'll be fun trying to get into that, I guess. But anyway, folks, we thank you for listening, and the Suffering Channel's next week, I guess. So that'll be the final story in this wonderful collection by David Foster Wallace. And then we'll give you our recommendations, and depending how long that episode goes, we might talk about David Foster Wallace and his like personal beliefs and stuff a little more. Because I don't think we did that. We touched on him in the first episode, like the intro, but I don't think we like really went into his because I don't like to go into the author's beliefs and all ideals and all that stuff before I read their work, because then I might have some kind of preconceived notions, or I'll go into their work like, oh, Foster Wallace hates women, so now I have to read these through that lens. Like, I don't want to do that. I just want to go into the work fresh-eyed and just judge it based on the merits of the work for itself, and then find out like the author is a fucking Nazi or a douchebag or, fucking whatever. But anyway, I don't think I have to do proper outros for these. Who cares? Go to drunkenpenwriting.com, folks, and check out what's on there. And, you can find the social media and all that stuff. And maybe by the time we're done with these episodes, we'll both be full-fledged novelists with best-selling books. What do you think?
Yes.
Maybe when we finally finish Jerusalem. We'll both be on the bestsellers list, have Pulitzer Prizes, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, thank you for listening. We'll check you next time.